Hi, everybody, and welcome. I am Maureen Droney with the Recording Academy Producers and Engineers Wing, and I'm welcoming you to today's episode of the pe.wing's ongoing series called The Forum, with today's episode titled Immersive Audio, What We've Learned, Part 2. Now, the Forum is the pe.wing's continuing series on matters that are of interest and importance to our approximately 6,000 members. So if you have topics we should talk about, let us know. For today's episode, we're thrilled to be hosting a conversation with two very talented producer mixers, Ken Duro Ifill and Dennis ROC.am Jones. Our hosts, once again today, are two very accomplished engineer producers, Glenn Lorbiecki in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle to be precise, and Jordan Hamlin in Nashville. Please put your questions in the Zoom Q&A function, and we'll have some time to answer them either during or after the conversation. So let's get right to it with our hosts. Glenn, Jordan, take it away.
Morning. Well,
Hey there, everybody. Glenn, you don't know what time zone you're in, do you? From international travel. Glenn Lorbiecki, back again.
I'm still on Warsaw time, so I apologize to everyone if I say things like good morning and good night, but I have no idea.
We'll understand. We'll understand.
Thank you.
And so will our amazing guests.
Hopefully so. So before we launch, I have to ask Jordan, what's the weather down there in Nashburg today?
It's rainy, but I'm gonna glass half full that into cozy. See how I did that?
That's good. Yeah,
That's
it's
true
not
rap.
raining in Seattle for a change. It's actually going to
Wow.
be 86 degrees tomorrow, so
Wow.
I'm moving out. Too hot for me. Okay, now that we got the weather forecast done, I hope it's beautiful wherever you folks are around the world. We have a rare and special treat. I say that every time, but this, I feel like that about all the folks we get to talk to. I learn something every time. It's like going to college for me. And especially, when Jordan starts to engage somebody in a conversation, because she gets people to go to places that you normally wouldn't get them to reveal things like that in a conversation. So Jordan, I appreciate that about you.
And Glenn, thank you for bringing all the I know how to do all the things part of it. So glad I can just glad hand anytime.
And we're lucky today because Maureen's going to hang out with us. Normally it's just the two of us, and I think Maureen's got some like pointed questions she wants to bring up. So
I know, especially since this is round two, we have so many conversations about this medium, about immersive, that it's been nice to dive in and try to not repeat. But I think this is going to be a unique perspective and one we haven't spent as much time in.
absolutely.
So without further ado, should we bring in our guests?
Let's do. And let me find my bios. If you don't mind, I'll go first and introduce.
Did threaten to make up the bio, so that's probably good that you reference.
Yep, I'm going to read this so that, I know you all can read this, but it's important for us here today to understand who we're talking to. Ken Duro Ifill is an engineer, producer, and music executive known for helping to shape the sound of hip hop and R&B over the past 3 decades. Although he doesn't look that old, but that's another story. He's best known for his work with artists including Jay-Z, Beastie Boys, Mariah Carey, Pharrell, DMX, Alicia Keys, and Nas, to name just a few. Duro's signature style blends technical mastery with a deep respect for musicality and culture. As the co-founder of Desert Storm Records and as a veteran executive of Universal Music Group, his influence extends from behind the board to the executive suite. Whether crafting radio anthems or timeless albums, Duro consistently delivers sonic excellence that moves both charts and hearts. Please welcome Duro.
Hey, hello everyone.
How you going, man?
I can't complain. It's a little cloudy but warm here in New York. But yeah, happy to be here.
Also today we have Dennis ROC.am Jones. He is a Brooklyn-born engineer, producer, and artist known for his immersive audio work and mixing credits with legends like James Brown, Frank Sinatra, Rihanna, and H.E.R. His work spans music, TV, and film, including Pitch Perfect and Wicked. His deep expertise in immersive audio opened doors for him into product design, R&D, and audio architecture, shaping how sound is built, experienced, and integrated into modern technology. Also a former Apple creative, Rock brings professional audio with lifestyle tech. He also founded the Never Give Up, an incubator-style nonprofit for supporting emerging artists through production, education, and development. And today, Rock remains a driving force in sound innovation and artist empowerment. And we're so glad to have him. Welcome, Rock.
Hello.
Hey, Rock.
Got some heavy hitters here today.
No kidding.
And I think the conversation about artistry, like heart and tech, I think was a good foreshadowing because those are kind of some of the things that have been coming up.
Yeah, every time we get engineers together to talk about immersive, it seems like things immediately take that hard right turn and go into technology. And I just came from the AES convention in Warsaw, and there were 3 days of solid, technology analysis of techniques and equipment and listening environments and HRTF and all of that stuff, but not a lot of discussion about the creative side of what it is that we do. And so really looking forward to kind of hearing from you folks who are so experienced on the artist side of immersive, which not a lot of people are. I mean, so far it seems like we're an industry of dabblers, right? Lots of people trying their hand, really not sure where to go with it. So I don't know. Jordan, would you like to pick a question and get these guys started?
I mean, starting is at some point, Duro, you mentioned something being downstream of like technical is downstream of creative. And I was like, oh, that's what it is. It's not that like one's important, one's not, whatever. It's like both are important and putting them, it almost informs the technical moves. And so having all those moves in your belt is important. But if you don't have the other thing, how do you know what moves to make? So how do you start with
Well,
even getting that GPS?
well, I would say that um, as creatives, everything starts with our imagination. You know, I think when we're creating music, or even after the music has been created and we're as mixers and we receive something, if we weren't a part of the original production, we hear things and we just immediately have ideas in our head of what this could sound like, or what we would like it to sound like, or how what we if we didn't have a conversation with the artist, or if we did, like where they were trying to go. Like, but generally, like for me, I always like to, even before I have a conversation with the artist, I like to hear it, right? And see what, without their input, see what comes to me and how I envision it, and then have a conversation and see if those things align, right? Because my thoughts around it may be different than theirs, and it may give them an idea, or after I have once I've kind of established my own idea, and or my ideas might affect them, and vice versa, so we have that conversation. But I think that you know, uh, even going back to stereo, like initially, I think that uh, it's really, again, it's really about the imagination, and what we're trying to create and how we're trying to make people feel, right? Because again, the music starts in our head, and it's like, how do we make it come through the speakers? And I just like to start with that, and once you have the idea, what tools can I use to make that come to fruition? So I think that's where it starts for me, and that's where that sort of thought process is. And yeah, I for me, mixing, although, or even just as an engineer in general, right? It's just, there are many technical aspects to it, but it is a creative process. I've always said that throughout my entire career. Like, hey, like, oh, you must know like capacitors or just whatever. All this kind of like stuff when people think of like an engineer, right? But I think it's way more than that. I think again, it the technology are tools to bring these ideas that come from our imaginations to life.
And you guys are both such unicorns because you're in the Venn diagram of creative and in the boardroom and thinking about it from a business or label or executive position. Um, and also an engineer to be able to like create. So I feel like, do you find that that's a strength that must be to um, A&R people don't always know how to budget time for or how important certain things are. But if you've been in the trenches of making that mix, have you found that to be an asset to how does that
Oh,
affect?
no, absolutely. Because I think that having an understanding of, we'll use those as like three separate pillars, right? Being in the studio, being an A&R, and then also the executive side. To be able to like communicate to all three verticals and have them all have a better understanding of what each is doing. So then it becomes more of a respect, right? And everyone's has a better respect for each person's craft, right? Because I think an executive is a craft as well as A&R, and then obviously creating the music, and it helps everyone work together, and it also informs like again it's a partnership, right? And having understanding of, well, at least for me, like me having a good understanding of marketing from the marketing department, sometimes like it doesn't I don't make different music because I understand marketing, but sometimes I'll hear something in a song and say, hey, can we tastefully lean into that, right? Because it can help the marketing department, or just like, and vice versa across the board, right? So it's really just kind of just trying to like have everyone working in lockstep, you know, respectfully.
Yeah, to chime into that, I look at it as just being an architect of everything, right? Um, Early on, starting this, it all for me, it started with just being in the basement with a bunch of my friends, and we were recording on a gooseneck mic on a PC, and while everybody was outside playing, I stayed back because I wanted my vocals to sound better than everyone else's, right? And the beauty behind it is, with creating with limitations, but with no limit because you don't know, right? So you're kind of just trying things out. And I think that's what makes immersive audio or just, mastering sound so important is because, everybody has their own perspective on how they perceive or intake music. For me, music is, and I know Duro can relate, it's all about a feeling, right? Since I was a kid, I can only tell you what something feels like when I hear it. Not so much of the lyrics or the beat or any of the technical things, but what the music makes me feel is how I can express. And when I mix, I think about how the music would make me feel and how it can make everyone else feel. So, being an engineer, there's so many hats that you put on, and then you start to understand and grow as you become better and more professional. You get into the business side. You work with the labels. You understand how the structure of the label works. Understanding your relationship with A&Rs, and then you step into so many other roles just by being ahead of just technology and understanding things. So it's a long journey, and I think there's so much opportunity and just being a creative in general, as long as we understand how to dissect it and utilize it for lifestyle and business purposes.
Y- Using your powers for good. I get it. Um, since you opened that door, I have to ask, how do you describe the relationship that you have with your artists? And simultaneously, you have to have a relationship with A&R people, like the label people, right? You've got multiple, you're balancing multiple inspirations here and multiple goals. With an artist, I don't know if artists nowadays are creating with Atmos, I'm sorry, immersive mixing in mind specifically. But I'm curious to see what your approach is there, and because I know kind of from the marketing side, from the label, what they're after. But can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I work specifically in catalog a lot. It's a little bit different from frontline. Frontline is usually the newer artists, new releases. catalog is re-releases. But it's interesting because I didn't understand how the business worked at first, right? So I didn't understand when a project would be proposed, or what was a P&L and all of these things. So what I used to do, and this is just coming from my experience, days that I wouldn't be busy, I would just go to the office and I would sit with the A&Rs when they had time, and I would literally just ask them questions all day long, to the point where it kind of built a kind of me understanding how structure and things work within that system, so I can be a better service for the label. Once I understood that, it kind of took things to the next level. And your A&R, that's the best relationship you can have between your A&R and your artist. You guys are the artists, and the A&R are kind of like you and the A&R, the engineer, are kind of like the people who are kind of planning and trying to execute and make things for the artists meet the expectations for the artist and the label. Your artist is really in the end all be all because they are the creative. So obviously a good creative chemistry style relationship is important too. And it kind of works in both, in both matters, and I think the core of that is trust. Without trust, nothing can really, work well, right? So once you build the chemistry, you build the trust, and then you start to, venture into other things, right? Because you're like, hey, let's try this, or they'll say, you can figure out, I trust you to take the lead on something, and it can be something that was never done before, so the new opportunity opens up. When it comes to immersive sound, when it rolled out, it was it's been around for some time, right? I've heard so many different stories, even from quadraphonic all the way to what they were doing in LA and at Capitol. But when it really rolled out and it became a thing where it was a deliverable, artists didn't really engage enough because we didn't build that structure just yet. So my opportunity and what I thought was important was to have the artist, A&R, or whoever didn't understand anything about immersive audio, to come and collaborate with me and sit with me and go over every aspect of it. If they had questions, if they had, concerns about anything, and just give them a proper roadmap. But also showing them that this is an opportunity for another set of expression for music. This is an opportunity for more activations, more experiences for yourself and your fans, for all listening platforms. And once you kind of understand the idea of that, the creativity just goes through the roof, and it's endless what you can do. It's really, no limitations at all.
Yeah, and picking up on that, I know just a handful of artists who are starting to create for immersive, and because it was so new and people were just still kind of figuring it out, a lot of the mixes currently are not afterthoughts, but they were like created for stereo, and then things that we expanded out. I think a big key in that, and game changer in that, is getting artists in the room. I haven't brought an artist into a room yet who had then like, oh, absolutely, I'm not doing that. They immediately become curious. They want to know, what's possible, and they may not jump on it right away, but it's definitely a light goes off. You see it every single time. Oh, maybe I can layer my vocals a little bit more, or add a specific vocal tracks to do this, to do that, or if they're like really deep into their storytelling, maybe adding some additional elements that help, almost like, because, every artist like always says, oh, I want my shit to be big, make it big, right? Make it wide, like make it, like it's always like every artist wants their music to be cinematic, like this, always had all this impact, right? Well, okay, now you have a format that if you add the right elements around those ideas, you can accomplish that, so I think that's like that, to me, that's always is the key to getting people in the room. And then having rooms where they can kind of like start doing these things, like at more over at Republic, we took one of our just sort of like production vocal suites, and we put an Atmos setup in that room. And people were like, and they could see the speakers are like, oh, what's that? And starts piquing their curiosity and start doing things there. So I think the key, I think it's going to take time, and and just continuously, sharing information, you know, and just showing artists, why this is good, and also too, like, again, uh creating around their intent, right? And it being tasteful. Like, everything doesn't have to be super like spinning around the room, and like every record doesn't call for that, So I think, just um being in line with, artist intent.
It does some art sometimes. Do you feel like you're having to do an extra lift with the artist if they come in? I've experienced some artists being a little like defensive, like they've been made to by the label maybe to do
Yeah,
this
but well,
and that.
I think how a
Do you want to just make them love it?
Yeah, no, I mean, you do want to make them love it, but I think a lot of that comes from, just the rollout of the format, where, people, there was a time when people felt like, oh, to get on playlists, I had to have this. And, and that's the last thing you want to tell an artist is what they must do, you know? And artists don't want to be told what they must do by people who don't make music. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, sometimes you're
um,
repairing some of that.
yeah, no, I mean, a lot of the time, almost every scenario, like, like, because people don't, and it's just like also like the language that you use to communicate that, right? Um, people even like people talking about it who don't know what they're talking about it. So,
And then there's also a whole side of the consumer side, which I know we talked about what are the opportunities for listening. Like that's
hmm
kind of a whole topic of both on the production pipeline, how's the artist listening, but let's talk about maybe consumer for a second.
hmm
You've got, personal listening, whether it's headphones or home theater, kind of things. Is that helping? Do you see that helping bridge
no,
that gap?
I think it definitely helps, but I think the real game changer will be cars. Because just more, just more space, and it's again a controlled environment. So you can be, because even if like a setup at home, you know, for example, like I use Sonos as example, they have their own little tool that helps you. So even if your speakers aren't like in the ideal position, it tries to go around the room. But in cars, these systems are created for this specific, listening environment. I mean, listen, that's why a lot of times as mixers, we like going in the car, right? Because we know our car, like nothing is going to really change about our car from each time that you know, we listen. So, I think that's going to be really a game changer on how people um, perceive it. And listen, and even I think the headphone experience for some folks, some people really like it, but it's one of those things that people listen to it and may not necessarily can tell how immersive. They know it feels different. It's almost like a out of tune vocal. Like a lot of people can listen to a vocalist who's like slightly out of key, and they're like, there's something about it. And they can't tell you, and it's from a consumer level. They can't tell you exactly what's wrong, but they know something's off, or they know, or something is happening in a song, and they can't pinpoint what it is that they like, but they're like, oh, but that makes me feel good, right? You know what I mean? And I think that um, in many ways, that's what immersive is, right? It's not creating a whole new song, right? But it's enhancing the emotion of what the song is intended to do.
Also, do we ever get away from that?
Do you ever get
I
a,
feel like as complicated as it gets, I feel like I always come back to like, does it feel good? Or like, does it achieve the feeling it's supposed to? Cool.
right? Exactly.
into
And
it.
and it doesn't really matter how you achieve that.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, like that's all it is. It's how it feels.
Interesting. There was a quote from this last year's immersive Grammy winner that I thought was kind of interesting. Hans Martin Buff did the Peter Gabriel record. which many of you folks are familiar with, but I thought it was really outstanding. He said, "When I create an immersive mix, I'm not trying to create an event. I'm trying to illustrate the music that's there. What's the point of putting in bells and whistles? I'm trying to take the music presented to me and turn it into a musical, enjoyable, and emotionally engaging mix. In immersive, I just have more to play with," which I
Mhm.
thought was kind of an interesting approach.
Mhm.
I mean, also, if you think about it, I tell people this all the time. In stereo, you know, we have this like condensed, compressed audio file, right? And we're constantly searching for space. We're trying to get everything in pocket. I want drum to be here. I want synth vocals here. And that's what we toggle with majority of the time. Atmos kind of creates the opportunity to not really think about that as much, right? That portion of it is majority of it from a stereo going into Atmos perspective is already done. So now there is a way to re-illustrate the music, right? There is a second opportunity of expression. And it's all about feel for Atmos. I mean, between harmonics, your multi-sensory kind of like listening, we as humans hear in 3D already, right? When you go out into the forest and you hear the water of the lake on the left side and a bird chirping, we listen in this aspect all the time. We're just not used to listening to music that way. So I think listening to it from a human experience would also enhance us as creatives, right? We're going to think a little bit further in life on how we want to, take in and listen to music, or how we want to create music and share it with our families and friends and fans. So, it's an ongoing experience, and I think with music and technology in full alignment, like full parallel, because that place used to be a little different back in some time, but now it's like we're working together so much that before you know it, we're gonna have everything that we need to just get this down to, hey, this is it. This is perfect. We have all the products. We can experience this just like how they experience in the studio. And you can see it now, with all the tech, there's, these sound audio applications where you can emulate what, immersive audio can sound like from a binaural perspective. They're always advancing in that from Apple's products and the VR goggles. So, I think the more we mess around with it and the more creatives dive into it, the more we will get actually like done in terms of just like the world being exposed and aware to what's happening in immersive sound and audio. And it's going to be the evolution of the new listening format for us.
No, absolutely. And we're actually moving really quickly, I think, on how good the immersive mixes are getting. Like if we even compare it to like stereo, right? When was stereo created? Like, I don't know, the 40s, maybe 30, I'm not sure exactly, right? But even how stereo was first used compared to how it's used now, right? Like you listen to old records where it almost seems like, stereo was like people still had like mono speakers at home. So it was like kind of almost being used for like increased headroom almost, right? Panning drums to one side or whatever, right? And then being summed. Like, but we're actually using immersive kind of how it's intended, right? But we're just working on the techniques to get it to get it better, right? And you know, I think this is how we're going to be listening to music for the foreseeable, future. And it's interesting because I'm really waiting for someone to create mixes where there is no left and right. There
Right.
is no like what I mean, because right now we're currently creating these immersive mixes based on how we're listening. We're say, how do we take this left and right signal and expand it out, right? We're starting from there, but like, starting from, kind of how ROC is saying, like, yes, we do listen in 3D now, but for the most part it's kind of directional. But like, how do we do that where there is no direction? Like, it's just, I mean, it's it's pretty wild when you think about what's to come.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
bring your stereo mind into an immersive world, you're still working in stereo.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm that's
You
a
know,
lesson. That's
it's
like a
funny. It's funny because when I dove deep into Atmos maybe in like 2020, 2021, and I was doing a lot, tons of it. And when I go back to stereo now, I feel I became a better mixer because my ears just got so accustomed to what Atmos sound like. I push a little bit harder for my stereo stuff to be immersive as well, because that's what we do in stereo anyway. So now I have like a whole. It's just a different I guess, learning curve, because now I'm like, all right, I want to push this as far as I can so I can get that same feel, so I can feel like things are above me and around me, and I don't have to fight for the space. So it's also a good technique for conditioning yourself just as an audio engineer, just to get better as well. It's definitely a different, like a switch in your musical palette.
So it's one thing to say that, but it's another thing to sell somebody that you can do that, right? So I'm thinking, Rock, I'm thinking specifically about your Sinatra project.
Mhm.
It's like, how do you improve on this world-class mono mix,
Right.
right? That was, recorded arguably all at once. You must have something, some special sauce or something that you bring to this to get that group of people who are very particular about their legacy to hear your vision. And I mean, can you talk about that a little bit? That's
Yeah,
like quite a coup.
definitely. I think what led me to doing that and doing it well was technology, because understanding the tools that were out there to help me expand, because we were in mono with the entire thing, and it was like, all right, there's but so much we can do, right? And that's usually what we think, but then we do a lot, tons of research. I'm searching all of these different, audio programs, AI separation, whatever it is, a multitude of things. And, you kind of go through your test. And what happened was the first pass went through, and it took some months for them to get back, but they got back to me and they was like, "Hey, this sounds good. Now we want to be particular about certain things, right? We want the orchestra to be in a certain place. We want Frank's vocals. Do not mess with Frank's vocals, all right? We will don't mess with his vocals. They need to be they need to be here." So once I understood the way that the dynamics of how they wanted the mixes to be, then I was able to go back into research and say, okay, let's use all of these tools again, but let's cater to what their tastes are. And from then on, it became just like, hey, this is great, this is perfect. And majority of the songs were, not to say that they were the same, but a lot of Frank's songs had, the orchestra, his lead vocal, whatever the case. So once that format was done, it's like when you work on an album and you get through the first like 2 or 3 songs, and after that, you kind of like fly through the wind. It works the same way when it comes to working with, I mean, specifically in catalog. So, the opportunity was just knowing technology, knowing what was out there and doing the research. And that's how I jumped into Atmos as well. I had no idea it was going to be this. I just thought it was a cool concept. And I'm like, I'm kind of bored in stereo. Let's take a dive into this and see, what the evolution of music can be. And staying curious as an artist, producer, engineer, creative, because everyone's a creative, nowadays. Everyone is, to whatever, caliber it is. You always want to be curious, because if you're not, then there's no point. You're not gonna search and try to do things differently. You're not gonna go against the grain. You're not gonna go above and beyond. So stay curious and just keep trying to prove yourself and prove others that there's always a different way, always a different perspective of doing things.
But I have a follow-up to that, though. Um, you have some choices to make. Even if you're able to do stem separation really well, you have choices to make. Are you going to present this as though the listener is in the audience observing a performance on a stage? Or are you going to try to mix this from the perspective of someone who's perhaps on stage in the band? This is actually inspired by a question from the Q&A. It's like, do you ever mix anything from that perspective where it's totally immersive?
Absolutely. So, um, with Frank specifically, it's a very interesting story. So, when I got through the first song, it kind of like got around that this was happening, and I was invited over to East West, right? And East West was, very influential space for Frank. And I remember I was with Candace, the manager, and she's showing me around, and she showed me the studio where the orchestra was, the same exact podium that's still there that he was on, and she went down the rabbit hole about stories about Frank, and she's like, yep, they would all play here. And if one guy was out of tune, Frank would point him out and they would have to go. And things like that. And that's why being part of the music community and understanding, what the culture is so important, because once I was there, all I did was just imagine what it was like. And I'm like, okay, this is an orchestra. He's right here at the front. All of these guys are here. We got this going on the side. And that kind of painted the canvas on how I was gonna approach the rest of his mixes and for the catalog. And every I guess artist, genre, whatever you may call it, is a different case, right? Sometimes I want to have like a nice euphoric kind of feel. I want to actually feel like I'm inside of the music, you know. I want to feel like, what does it sound like if I, go to tie my shoe, and what does under the music sound like, because it's an adaptive nature, right? We're going to the gym, we're, walking out in the street, we're going to our cars. So I'm always thinking about adaptation, and I think that's where the opportunity for a second form of expression comes, and is very important. It's like we can
Mhm.
make this feel like we're in a concert, or we can make
Right.
it feel like we're in the front in your living room or in the backyard. You know what I'm saying? So
Right. And I also think that comes with like choosing a mixer, right? Because I think that even when you think about again, going back to stereo, right? Because like you choose a mixer because of generally because of certain things that you know that they bring to a record, right? Whether it's a style or like, there's certain things about them that they bring to to a record. So like for me, example, like my perspective is 99% of the time gonna be um of me being inside of the record. It's not going to be of like from like a show or a stage. I just me personally, I don't really like shows. I don't really like concerts because they never to me. I've just been like I feel like I've been like a record guy for so long that like the shows never live up to how I've heard a record, right? So I'm like always like, how do I increase, like feel more of what I feel when I'm making like a record for not for a show, but like for for an album per se, or like from that perspective, right? And I think that some people are really good and make really compelling, like show or concert style immersive mixes, and some people are better the other way and vice versa, you know what I mean? So I think that it's really um I guess like you said, it's you have to make a choice, right? And then again, like it's also based around like mixing styles, or like you choose someone based around the content. Like there's certain records that uh that even a record that I produce that I don't want to mix because the way I envision the song, I go to an outside mixer, other than myself, because I'm like, oh, they would kill this, or like the way they do this particular thing, even as a mixer, I've done that many times, you know.
mhm.
Yeah, that makes me think sometimes people aren't even cognizant of talking about A&R, of if they're doing hiring, or if this is a someone managing for a label who has tons of catalog that they want, made mixes for. Sometimes they aren't thinking of a producer, engineer, mixer's particular voice,
Hmm.
and bring you a project, or that's not in your wheelhouse, and you're like, oh, I am thinking on that level, and I know this person would be great for it or whatever.
Right. Right.
Are there?
And listen, and on that too, it's like I don't necessarily blame them
No, no,
for that. I
no.
think right because it's because again, we're still such early days. Like, I think in that perspective, because a lot of people will say, oh, again, they immediately know who they want to do the stereo and for specific reasons, right? And I think that they haven't heard enough or heard a lot of immersive, or because of how it was introduced to them, they're like, oh, just like keep it like, and that's another thing, like even like myself in the very beginning, it was stereo and I was just pulling a couple, like I was like, I had this mix here and I would maybe go this far with my immersive, like nothing behind my ears, like, and then all of a sudden, I got things going tastefully, I think, all the way around the room, right? That was my next thing, right? And then I would, stuff, obviously using the top, but then I realized that, wait, everything going around the room is at the same height, right? So then now you're around the room and then you're playing with heights. It's like anything else. So it's like, first you learn how to ride the bike straight, right? Then you learn how to do a wheelie, right? After you've gotten your balance, right? And then so it's like you're constantly adding on to, different techniques to your fundamental, basic skill set, and I think the listener is uh and the artists are going along on that same journey, because like you said, like we're still thinking in stereo, like, so you're slowly getting people used to hearing music, that way. Although, as Rock stated, we live in immersion, like everything, so
And
it's
whether it's the listener or maybe the estate associated with the catalog or whoever, they also probably have a relationship with the existing stereo mix.
yeah. Listen,
So,
when I do a lot of catalog stuff, I generally start all my mixes stereo, because especially like I'm thinking about like all like some of the Motown stuff and the Temptation stuff that we did, and you know those first couple of licks when a song comes on, before there's a vocal, you hear like that, whether it's like a drum roll or just something, you're like, oh, that's that song, right? And now if you try to start with that and made it immersive, the first thing people would be like, right? But they hear it the way they know it. You give them those first couple of bars, you give them those first couple of elements, and as the mix goes, you create a sonic kind of arrangement outside of the musical arrangement. You're now adding things, and as the mix goes, so it may start here, but at the end, and when I say here, like literally mono, because some of these records write with mono, right? And by the end of it, it's it's truly an immersive experience, right?
yeah,
And
if you start the snare with Ain't Too Proud to Beg and you're doing something crazy with that intro, that's not the time.
Mhm.
Like I want that legendary Motown,
Correct,
you
yeah.
know.
And again, that's literally like not just music, that's just like life in general. Like you have to like warm people up to things, right? They, sometimes people, like to feel comfortable in something that they know that it's that and feel stable, and then you got to give them a little bit, you give them a little bit more as they go along, you know.
And everything doesn't have to be in Atmos, you know? Some things can stay where it is. Some things can
Hmm.
stay mono, some things
Hmm.
can stay stereo,
Hmm.
5.1, and so on and so forth. So I think that's another thing too is, even though this is, I mean, it's like a deliverable now, right? You when you're submitting with certain labels, they want an Atmos mix. But there's times where it's just like we don't have to do that, there's no creative intent on it, and that's okay, you know. Um, so yeah. I also just wanted to say hello to everybody in the chat. I mean, the chat's just I'm trying to read everything that you guys are saying. You guys are going crazy in there. Thank you so much.
We can actually address some of the questions in the chat, but Maureen, you've been very kind of quiet and polite, and I have a feeling that you're thinking about something. Would you care to share that with us?
No, no, I had questions for you. Some of them came from Ebony Smith and some of them I just came up with, but I, I am so pleased with this conversation because as all the webinars and conversations we've had about Atmos, I haven't heard it discussed this way. I haven't heard it discussed where you're including not just the artist, but you're including the A&R people. You're including. It's just this just sounds really interesting and important to me in terms of getting the best product and having everybody excited about the best product so that they want to help market it. I mean, it's pretty amazing. So no, I thought I had questions, but I don't. You guys have those list of questions that I sent though, right? If you want to go to them.
We haven't touched on deliverables. Dare we talk about the end of the process, the handoff?
Uh,
I
uh,
also, before we move on, I'm curious, have you ever have you really like swung for the fences, whether on probably catalog, but anytime really? Have you ever swung for the fences on a mix that you're like, I'm gonna do something spicy. I'm gonna take a chance. And they've either way, either they've like gone for it or been like, get off it.
oh yeah. Several occasions. I think you kind of gauge on how that can happen, right? And that's from a catalog perspective is a little bit different than new releases, but in catalog you're talking about years and years, decades and decades of just music that people know, right? So you tend to kind of like freak everyone out. Just naturally. That's just how it works. It's like getting shocked, right? But I think the conversation starts with, you know, A&R state, or especially the artist, what that soundscape can be. And I usually kind of start in a more preserved fashion, and then I do little things here and there to kind of trigger some points, right? Just to see, what if I did that? What if I did that? And without saying it, kind of get a reaction. And then, you know, if you're working on an album, catalog, whatever the case is, now you know, okay, let me take that part a step further. Let me add a little bit more. And you just kind of keep going and going until they say, hey, chill out.
Mhm,
You know what I mean?
mhm.
Um, and that's what's cool about it. I think that's the same approach when it comes to stereo mixing, that, you know, we're always shooting for the stars. Like just the other day, you know, I just picked up like a old school reverb that was like, must have been like $100, like, and analog, and I'm just like, this reverb sounds dirty, it sounds horrible, but it's kind of cool. I want to use something in the analog reverb space, and I just started trying it on vocals, right? And the artist was like, whoa, this sounds a little grainy, but you know, I like it for this record. You know, it may not be that way for other things, but we got to try. We definitely
Mhm.
got to try.
Yeah, I was gonna say you have to take strategic shots, and Rock, you're right. It's like we've been doing this since stereo. Like you do things and you take these chances, but you set them up. Like you know what I mean? Like you know, again, it's you. There's a couple. You give a couple little tastes of things that kind of lead up, so that when they happen, they're cool, but they're not like where did that come from, right? It's like, you know, it's similar to like, again, the musical arrangement. Like you do things, and again, it also depends on the song. Like sometimes, you know, some songs you can just tell by the artist that they're okay with like making drastic, abrupt sort of things just because their original composition speaks to that. And others are a little bit more tame, but again, you have to do little things that kind of warm up the, you know, quote unquote, like uh the algorithm of how they listen, like, you know, just kind of like get them ready and kind of prime their ears for this thing that you want to try. And you know, generally, you know, you sometimes they're like, oh, that's cool, but can you dial it back a little bit? Or they may say, hey, can you do that 2 more times? You know what I mean? But it's all based on how you set up and how you present it, you know.
And that relates to a question from the chat actually about, are we listening to the same thing? I know Barry said, do labels and our managers have Atmos rooms for mix approval? Sometimes that's even a thing of,
Absolutely. And I would say that most of them are listening on headphones. Some of them will come to the studio. I would say the majority of them are listening on headphones. In my personal experience, uh, I worked with a team that trusted in me, and I would do their approvals for them, you know. But then again, that's also like them knowing me having an understanding of different artists. But again, similar taste. Like, you know, when I'm mixing, you know, Jay-Z, or I'm mixing, and I'm just talking about just going back to a stereo, right? Mixing Jay-Z and mixing the Beastie Boys. I knew what my level of limitations, or where to push, or what I could push, you know, just from my experience in working with them, right? So when you have these working relationships, um, you know what shots and how far you can push, you know, you know how far I could push to get, like, you know, I knew what I could do with Jay, and he would say, you know, generally with him, I'd get like, oh, can you just lower my vocal a little bit, or a little less reverb? There's basic notes, because we had worked together so much. I knew, and I'd push
just that
things,
trust.
you know, and then the same thing, you know, Beastie Boys. They would let me try anything, and 9 times out of 10, whatever I tried, they just like, oh yeah, okay, cool, you know, and it would never be, generally never dial it back. It'd usually be cool or do more. And again, that's you just spending time with your clients and understanding what their sensibilities are, and what they like.
Yeah, that's the benefit of building that trust and having those conversations. And once they feel like he understands me, I can like let go a little bit.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That makes me wonder about how you listen to an immersive mix. So, quick story, and then I'll ask you two to fill in the blanks. Um, uh, I was at a listening event last fall, immersive listening event with Duro, and we're listening to a lot of material. And as certain mixes would come up, um, I would, I was standing near Duro, and as you would hear this, there were certain mixes that, you would kind of ponder, and I could see your thought process as you're, analyzing the mix. But some of them, you get a few seconds into the mix and kind of, and I had asked you at the time, how do you decide what you like? How do you decide if an immersive mix sounds good to you? What are the qualifications for a good mix? And so, I mean, there were some questions in the chat about, do A&R people have rooms that are set aside that are specifically set up for Atmos so they can make evaluations? But I'm more interested in, as a producer, how do you hear stuff? How do you decide if something is good?
Um, I would say again, I think it starts with a feeling. It's like how does it, how does it make me feel? Do I feel again when I listen to the stereo and I listen to this, do I feel like I don't want to say more alive, but just more emotional based on whatever the intent of the song is. Like, do I feel warmer? Do I feel if it's like a dance record? Do I feel even more hype? Do I feel like I had 2 shots of tequila just by switching from stereo to immersive? Like, you know what I mean? It's like those sorts of things. And then I start, then I go into the technical part of it, right? Because I think, it's interesting. I had this conversation the other day, and some friends of mine were asking, like, we listen to like some like newer like hip hop artists, and they're like, "You like that?" I'm like, "Yeah," and they didn't understand like how I was relating to it, right? And I, we had a conversation about, as you get older, right, you become a little bit more cerebral, not just music, just everything, right? But when you're younger, like everything you base is on feeling and instinct first, right? And then you may not have uh the understanding yet to really get into the technical part of why or why not, right? But as we get older, the first thing we do is we start listening to like you hear and you're like, oh, I know those drums. Oh, I heard, like you just become like really like kind of like flipping about and you don't and you're analyzing like all these technical aspects or thing and not feeling, right? So I always try to go into things with like as my 16-year-old self, like I try to feel it first, and then once I understand how it makes me feel, then look at the technical parts of it, right? Because it's hard to get technical and then go back to having like a certain like kind of raw emotion about things, right? And that's really my approach to just music in general, whether it's stereo, whether it's immersive, whether it's producing or anything I like. I try to just strip it down to those basic, that rawness of does it feel good, and how, what does it feel? And then because and we've talked about this before, like, and we just talked about like, when it goes to like catalog, like starting it, more, mono and making them more stereo, and then creating doing like a level of storytelling with the immersive arrangement, if we can call it that, right? And I think that to me is something that sometimes I listen to, I'm like, wow, I like how they did that, like how they took me on a journey, how they, made it, as opposed to this 2D sort of, like if you talk about it in visual, like a visual thing, like it's like the stereo is like looking at a regular TV show, right? And then 5.1 was like putting on glasses, like the 3D glasses. And now we have this like immersive, like an Atmos and these other formats. It's like going to Universal Studios, right? And like you're watching it, you got the glasses on, and as you're going, and it's like bumpy, the seats are moving, and they're spraying water on you, and like it's like truly like that thing, right? And it's taking you through like a journey, and when I'm starting to feel those sorts of things and feeling even a higher level of connection with the composition, like to me that's when I know it's good. There's not a technical thing, right? You go back to stereo, and I'll just be like, my last point on this is like, you know the first Wu-Tang album is like such a beautiful piece of of art, like the way, and what was super it was about how you made you feel in that moment. And if you look at it from a technical engineer standpoint, you'd be like, oh, this sounds like shit. Like, why would you do this? Or why aren't the loops perfectly in time? Why is this so dark? Or why is this, like, all the things that just don't, fit in these like normal
Mhm.
uh formats of like how we make music. And that's what made it so beautiful. And again, if you looked at it from a technical standpoint first, you would never, people would never enjoyed it.
Candace, did we record that? That was like so.
We
So
did.
Rock.
We are recording, and people are asking a lot of questions.
Oh,
Um, but I think we just had a different vision of working in Atmos today from all of you.
Mhm.
And the way you do it. I mean, there's so many complaints about A&R and labels and A&R people not getting to hear the music properly. And you seem to um, del not even need to go in that direction, although I'm sure you do. And part of it is because of your experience,
Mhm.
just in how long you've been in the business and understanding the business side of it, as well as understanding the creative side of it and trying to figure out how to work together to make really great products. And I'm so impressed with that. I do have one question, though, out of all the ones we had listed here that we didn't ask you. Um, there's all these new spatial audio tools coming out. THX just announced, I think, a couple days ago, immersive platforms for laptops and headphones. Samsung and Google are pushing a new standard called Eclipse. You've probably heard about, right? Um, for YouTube videos and something they're calling a 3D experience that's supports available all along Samsung's line of TVs and soundbars. What do you think about that? I mean, I mean, obviously it could be really good. What do you think about that?
That's all part of that's this conversation, honestly. That's everything we've been speaking about. And the more and more other companies and they're creating like we are, right? So they're seeing what the core of everything is being done at, where it's starting. And now they're building products around what we're doing, and software. And I think the ideal reason is obviously because we all know that this can become our traditional format because it's happened already twice, so we have to work together to form the adaption. We have to create it so that it is open source and available to everyone. So there's going to be constant, and I think since I've started this, there's always like something new rolling out. There's always a new way of doing something. And this is because we're still in the early stages. And it's great because when it's early, there's a lot of opportunity. And it's the best time to dive into it and just be creative.
Are there any other questions that sent you guys or that you see in the chat that we should answer while we have still a couple more minutes?
I wanted to actually touch base really quick on the A&Rs and artists having an opportunity to listen in the rooms. So like that's one thing that I really push at all costs, especially independent artists. It's a little bit different, right? Because they're limited on resources. But labels, independent, whoever you can, if there's opportunity to get in a room, however that may be, um, it's always important to push the idea of that. And if you can't, then you kind of just downsource. So for instance, I was working on a specific catalog. It was for Rihanna. And this was like right before Super Bowl. She was doing all of her performance stuff. So it was kind of hard to get in touch with her. And she wouldn't come to the studio. She was also having a baby that wasn't public yet, right? We didn't know all of these things. She's super celebrity. So, we're thinking, I'm teaming up with Apple and we're thinking, okay, how are we going to get her to listen to this or get whoever closest to her to listen to this, right? We
Hmm.
don't want to just give them a binaural perspective of this. We want them to hear what we're hearing. So, Jay Brown was someone that was involved, obviously, and he was going to do the approvals. But it was hard for him to even get into the studio. So, what we ended up doing was I went to Best Buy, went and bought an Apple TV. We got a Sonos set up, and they literally built built the Sonos setup in his house. And I would mix the records with one of her DJs at the time who now works for Apple, and we would go listen. He would approve it in the studio. Then I would have to take the MP4 file, put it on an iPad, which was the iPad for Jay Brown, and they would bring it to his house to listen to for an approval. And that, they did that with the Sonos system, with the car. And I mean, at any given point where you can get someone to listen in an immersive setting, I think that's important. And that's also another creative aspect of it, right? The your preference of listening is also creative. So,
Yes.
when it comes to it, it's like, yeah, we have limitations because of the resources, but if, I'm passionate about immersive audio, and I think that it is something that's gonna just continue to grow for the future and betterment of music in general. So I'm gonna push as hard as I can to get at the closest experience to what I'm getting when I'm working inside of a studio.
And I don't mean to be controversial, but on when you hear the mixes that you've done on Apple Spatial, are you generally pretty pleased? Do you hear what you were hoping to communicate?
Absolutely. I look at Apple's encoding as just a form of taste and preference. I look at Apple as like a person. You know what I mean? This is their format. This is how they want to express their format. Why? Because they have particular products that they use that they want to be expressed in that way.
Mhm.
So, for instance, Apple has the head tracking technology and adaptive modes and things like that. And it's like you have the option to turn it off and on. I do think it's a cool perspective, and they're actually enhancing the immersive audio experience because as you're moving around and you're moving your head, or like I said, I go to the gym a lot, and I usually love to go with my spatial audio headphones because it adapts to everything that I'm doing. If I'm, bench pressing, I'm like the movement of the music changes a little bit for me. If I'm looking left while I'm doing that, and honestly, again, going back to just human nature, we already listen in this format, right? So it's kind of like it almost feels like I don't have headphones on. There's nothing attached to me. I'm just literally just going with my instinct, and I'm feeling every part of, what's happening. And then I'm picking specific music based on, how I'm feeling or what type of lifting I'm doing or just whatever the case is. So I think like companies like Apple are so huge and innovative because they continue to conquer lifestyle. I mean, you have a product that's an iPhone, and you don't think of any use case for your iPhone. You just pick it up and go because it's a part of, we're pretty much like half human, half computer because of this.
Yeah.
So when it comes to product, when it comes to technology, when it comes to music, music's always been lifestyle. It's always from every culture,
Mhm.
every genre, from rap, jazz, whatever you may call it. So if we're thinking in a lifestyle perspective, then of course things are just gonna adapt, and we're not gonna think nothing of it because it becomes second nature. It becomes instinctive.
Yeah. And also, talking about like listening environments, and it's a good point you were saying about Apple having like their particular taste. I mean, listen, every car, like the stereos tuned differently.
Yeah.
Like, whether you go from, Honda to Toyota to BMW to Mercedes to Porsche, like everyone has a different, party, third party that they partner with to help them craft a system based around the the taste, or what they're trying to achieve and how they want people to feel in their vehicle, right? Which is, um again, their taste. And I would say about listening environments for immersive, there are environments that are better than others, but I think that we put a completely different set of standards on immersive than stereo. Like we'll listen to stereo and say it's good in some pretty bad situations, or like, just like, again, just
It's true.
just in general, like, it's like, you listen, you don't listen, do you sit in a sweet spot every place you go to listen to a stereo mix? No. And it still sounds good, right? And the thing about like immersive is, what, if you sit in a different place in the room, it's supposed to be a little bit different,
Yeah.
right? Because I mean, that's how life is. I mean, that's literally, that's life. Like literally, like if I'm sitting here and you guys are talking to the screen, if I move over here, I'm gonna hear it a little bit different. It's just it is what it is, and you're just gonna feel a little bit different in that moment. And I think that um it how your listening environment can be dynamic. I think how you feel a particular day when you hear a song, just like if I mix a song today versus mix it tomorrow, based on how my morning went, it might be, you're gonna get slightly a different mix. If I'm feeling a little bit more pumped up and aggressive, the drums might hit a little bit harder. Yes, it's gonna be the same song, but there are gonna be certain nuances that are gonna be different. And I think that's okay. That doesn't make one mix better than the other. It just makes it a little bit different, right? And the end result, and then how people then feel it is gonna be possibly a little bit different, right? But that's also going to be based on their listening environment and how they feel that day, right? So it's a very dynamic, always changing sort of thing. It's like, sometimes people say, oh, what's your favorite song? And I'm like, you know what, this week, you know what I mean? Like, honestly, for for me, people ask me what I've been listening to recently, and I'm like, you know what, for the last month I've been listening to Coltrane, literally, like every day. It's just I have been having it, like these Coltrane things. I don't know why. It's just I heard it. I was somewhere and I heard Coltrane. It made me feel a certain way, and I was like, wow, this makes me feel good. And I just been listening to it for about a month, you know. And who knows? And I might go somewhere and hear something else, and then I just might be like, I don't know, Travis Utopia album for a month after that, just whatever. But I think it's, again, all this stuff is, it's okay, and it's about how we feel, and the technology and the spaces are important, but sometimes we gotta just relax a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank Ebony Smith is not on today, but it was her idea to combine you two. I see Carrie Thomas is we got a lot of people in the chat asking each other questions. I see Carrie's there. And thank you for everybody who came. And we will be doing more. And I just love this different take on things coming from the creativity side, because we have done many webinars on the technical stuff, and this is what it's really all about. And also,
Yeah, just
yeah.
when you think you've talked too much about immersive, we bring you it's
Right.
not just a format, it's a lifestyle.
Yeah,
Yes,
Yo,
it really
yes,
is, though.
Yes.
that's great.
It's
So.
an influence of our music,
So thanks everybody who joined us today. If you have ideas for upcoming forums, pe.wing at grammy.com. And we hope to see you next time. Thank you all for coming. This was great.
take care, guys.
Thanks for
Chat. See you later.
All right.